A research square. This is an AJE Research Square event in collaboration with our partners at the Mars Research Network. So we are a company that's headquartered in Durham, North Carolina. Research Square company consists of two divisions, AJE, American Journal Experts, and Research Square. And we are here to help researchers to achieve their potential. And so this afternoon, today, we're going to be talking about the editorial process and peer review. We're going to be talking about how you can manage the peer review process as an early career researcher, as a researcher. So that's our goal for this presentation. If you've not heard about me before, my name is Gareth Dyke. Thank you so much for joining us. I have a bunch of experience working in the UK, in the US, in Ireland, and also in Hungary. So that's my background, that's my experience. Thank you so much for joining us. It's wonderful to see you all here today. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be talking today about peer review in our webinar presentation. So wonderful. Like, we are AJE, we are Research Square, we have our headquarters in the US, in Durham, in North Carolina. We are able to help you with your projects, we're able to help you with your editing, we're able to help you with your translation services. And our mission at Research Square Company is to make research communication faster, fairer, and more useful. So that, I hope, will provide the foundation for the discussion that we're going to have this evening, because we were founded in 2014, and so far we've supported more than 2.5 million research authors in more than 192 countries around the world through our preprint services platform, Research Square, and AJE's suite of manuscript preparation services. You can see where we are, like who we work with, the publishers that we work with. Good afternoon, Marina. Anyone who wants to put their contact information, type into the chat box, say hello to us this evening, would be absolutely fantastic. So this evening, we're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk about understanding what peer review is. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how peer review works. And then we're going to talk thirdly about some of the common problems that researchers encounter in the peer review process. So, understanding what peer review is, knowing how peer review works, and recognizing those common problems that researchers often have with the peer review process. So let's begin. Let's start to talk about what peer review is. And as a researcher, you're gonna have experienced this kind of feeling, like as a researcher, writing up your papers, trying to get your papers published is a very arduous, it's a very difficult process. Of course, you have to fight the gambit, you have to go through the process of submitting and going through peer review, and it's often not something that's very enjoyable. Most scientists regarded the streamlined peer review process as quite an improvement. Often, many of us as researchers going through the process of peer review a complete nightmare. But of course, it's so important for the publishing process because, of course, peer review as a process filters and improves content for researchers. What does that mean for you? What does that mean for us? Well, at the basis of our understanding of how we get to see content published in peer-reviewed journals, peer review is the cornerstone of that process. If a paper has been peer-reviewed, then we as researchers accept that it is a paper that we can take and we can cite and we can use in our own research. So peer review is fundamentally important. It really does filter and improve content for researchers. So it should be a positive process. It should improve. Hello, someone wants to ask a question? Someone wants to unmute and ask something? We have a colleague who wants to unmute and ask a question.
Okay, I muted everyone. If anyone have question, please type it.
You're always welcome, everybody, to ask a question in the chat box. Put your hand up so we can unmute you. But I'm hearing some background noise, so I'm wondering, like, if it's now somebody wants to ask a question. No? Okay, so let's talk about perceptions of peer review, because the peer review process in academic publishing has a number of different areas, and this is the process that's used to judge the quality of academic papers that are submitted for publication in scholarly journals. And peer-reviewed papers are thought to be reliable because they've undergone this process before publication, of course. So the different peer review processes can improve your paper. They should advance the field. And how can you get involved as a researcher in the peer review process? That's something that we do spend a lot of time. That's something that we would love to spend a lot more time talking with you and your colleagues about as well, like how you can get involved in working as a peer reviewer. What are your obligations as a reviewer in the community? How can this process improve your manuscript writing? Well, there are several different kinds of peer review. And the first of those kinds is blind peer review. And that's where you and the author of the paper are anonymous to the peer reviewer. So you don't know who the peer reviewer is, and the peer reviewer doesn't know who you are. That's blind peer review. And, you know, that's something also that you might wish to consider as a researcher when putting your paper into a journal submission system for peer review. What kind of peer review are you going to consider? Like, what would be best for you? Data show that the increased use of double-blind peer review makes it more likely that papers are going to get accepted after the peer review process without further consideration. So it's important to think about these kinds of things. Like, there are different kinds of peer review that are available to you as a researcher. Blind, where the reviewer is anonymous to the author. Double blind, where both the reviewer and the author remain anonymous. Open, where no one is anonymous. Or transferable, where the sharing of peer review comments between journals and publishers is made possible. So what are you going to do? What will be best for you as an author when you next submit a paper to a journal? Different kinds of peer review are used by different kinds of international journals. So let's go through these in sequence using a graphic that was given to us by the Public Library of Science, by PLOS. So in the most common kind of peer review, reviewers know the author's identity, but the reviewers' names are protected. That's called single blind. There's a signed kind of peer review when the reviewers sign their comments, but the authors receive the reviewers' names in the decision letter. There's a kind that's called collaborative, where reviewers collaborate and submit joint comments, or in some cases confer with authors and editors during the review process. There's a kind of peer review that we call portable, where reviewers' comments can be shared with another journal, usually, but not always, between journals of the same publisher. And at Springer Nature, we have lots of different journals collaborating with us and within the Research Square platform to enable this and to make this happen as well. We have published peer review, where reviewer comments and or names are published with the article or with the preprint. And we also have a kind of peer review that's called post-publication, where after a manuscript is posted, the community can review the research in an open forum. So it's most important as an author to engage with peer review, to be aware of the different kinds of peer review that you can use, and to check the kinds of journals that you're going to submit your papers to, and the kinds of journals and the kinds of peer review that those different journals use. So when you submit a paper to an international journal, it's important to think about what peer reviewers are checking for. When peer reviewers check your paper, they're looking for relevant hypotheses. They're looking for appropriate methodologies. They're looking for good data and good analyses, and they're looking for complete data. They're looking for valid conclusions. They're looking to make sure that everything is okay with the work. So in terms of relevant hypotheses, they're looking to ensure that you're up to date with the field, that you're submitting a paper that's up to date with the current state of the field, that you've identified a current knowledge gap. In terms of appropriate methodologies, are you up to date with your methods? Are you up to date with your proper controls? In terms of good data and good analysis, are you providing proper quantitative analyses? Are you providing appropriate statistical tests? Are all of your data included and discussed? And are you basing your conclusions only on presented data? So, as an author, you are going to experience peer review in terms of enhancing your article's chances of acceptance. And you're going to get involved and be able to more effectively respond to the comments that you get on your paper in peer review. So as an author, you will be using the peer review process to enhance your article's chances of acceptance and to more effectively respond to the comments that you receive in peer review. But as a reviewer, you will be learning to comment constructively on the work of others and developing key transferable skills in terms of performing peer review. So here are some examples. When I receive emails as an editor about, work that I have under submission, work that I have under, peer review, dear editor, who reviewed my paper? I need to know. The comments I received are just plain unfair and just wrong. Who wrote this about my work? It's very important to be polite, very important to be efficient, very important to be effective when you respond to peer review comments. So it's often the case in many situations that when you submit a paper to a journal, the reviewers are going to want to hide their identities. They're not going to want you, the author, to know who they are. So, in terms of this situation, it's worth asking yourself as an author, why is it that reviewers want to hide their identities? Well, journals may want this blind review. Editors may want to offer this outcome to reviewers so they can get more honest comments. Reviewers may want to order this in order that they can be more honest. Blind peer review is often open to abuse. Of course, more power in the hands of peer reviewers. So what can we do as authors? What can we do in these situations as authors when we submit our papers into a journal, manuscript processing system, manuscript central, journal manager, whatever open journal systems? You write a paper, you get ready to submit it to a journal, you're going to put it into the submission system. What are you going to do next? What can you do as an author? Well, check which kinds of peer review are used by target journals. Check which kinds of peer review are available to you as an author and choose which is best for you? Will it be double blind? In which case, both you and the reviewers are unaware of each other's identity. That's double blind. Will it be single blind, where, of course, the reviewers are aware of your identity, but they're not aware of their own situation? They're not aware that you're aware of who they are, but they're not aware of you. That's single blind, or 100% open. Consider using preprint servers. This would also be a good option for many authors listening to this presentation. Open research, open access, considering using preprint servers, and open peer review. So what is best for you as an author? What is the best outcome for you? Many authors come to us and they say that I feel I've been dumbed down by peer review because of my location, because of my institution, because of my background. Well, why didn't you pick the option of taking your work to a journal that uses double-blind peer review? So both you and the author are hidden from each other. In this situation, consider using a journal that uses double-blind peer review. Both you and the reviewer are hidden from each other. So there are a number of things that you need to think about in this situation that ensure that your submission to the journal are blinded, so that the reviewers can't tell who you are as an author. So when you make that submission, make sure that your title page and your acknowledgements are on a separate page. They're in separate files. Anonymized place names, regions, and nationalities don't write, as we have previously showed in our earlier work. Cite yourself, for example. That's a dead giveaway. You're always going to be able to show like who you are if you do that. Make sure that all of those all of those author identifiers are removed from your Word and from your PDF submission. So if you are considering a journal submission that uses double blind, both you and the reviewers are hidden from each other. So submit your title page and acknowledgements as a separate file. Anonymize those place names, including regions and nationalities. Don't write, as we have previously showed, and take out from your article author identifiers, PDF identifiers from the submission. So tips for blind peer review. Does your journal use it? It's very important if you want to make sure that you're, unable to, put your work into a journal. Make sure that you're able to use a journal that may use blind peer review. Very important. Very. So does your journal use peer review? Does your journal use peer review? Fantastic. Does the journal use peer review? Tip number 1, turn off all your track changes, and in MS Word, make sure that you're not tracking those changes. Remove any author identification marks in MS Word. Cite your own work anonymously. Recent work has shown, rather than we have recently shown. So ways in which you can show that your work is cited effectively in the context of blind peer review. So what happens if you get your paper into the submission system and then it comes back from peer review and you're asked for problematic issues? If you're asked to make changes after peer review that are problematic. So, during peer review, you should not be asked to add citations to papers that have been written by that reviewer. Make changes to more favorably reflect earlier work. Remove or modify hypotheses to placate a reviewer. And if you have any issues as a peer reviewer, as an author, Write to the journal editor and ask for help. It's very, very important. Journal editors are there to police the process and ask and provide help in the process. So if your article as well gets stuck in the system, what should you do? And this is one of the most common questions that we do get from authors who write to us about their papers. What should I do? What should I do if my paper has been stuck in the system? Write to editors. If you end up waiting for more than 6 weeks to receive comments on your paper, because of course the average time from submission to online publication is just 90 days. So we would like to see people writing emails like, "Dear editor, we see that our paper is still awaiting reviews. Can we make some suggestions to speed up the process? Is there anything that we can do to help with the process? Here are some suggestions for additional peer reviewers that you might like to contact." Be polite to peer reviewers, give something back, and be positive. Are you waiting a long time for your paper to be published? This is very, very, very important. Why might there be a delay? Editors are searching for reviewers. Reviewers are being slow. No reviewers have accepted, and the editor has just forgot. Here's a survey of data from Springer Nature. Very critical, very important to look at this, because almost 10% of Nature readers say that their longest wait to get a paper published in a journal has been more than 3 years. We have lots of authors who are waiting a huge amount of time to get their papers published. What can you do? Well, if you end up waiting for more than 6 to 8 weeks to get your paper back after peer review, then it's time to write a polite letter to the editor. Make additional suggestions for potential reviewers, and stay confident always in the face of rejection. Here are several examples of papers that I published myself that did not initially get accepted. After first peer review, they got rejected after first peer review. If you feel that you have gotten negative comments, if you feel that you've gotten comments that you don't agree with, if you feel that you've gotten comments that you can address, then write to the editor. Staying confident in the face of rejection is indeed one of the keys to success as an international researcher. So here are some examples. Journals often, when you write articles, when you put articles into the submission system, they leave the door open for that resubmission. They leave the door open for you to put the paper back in again, even if the paper has initially been rejected. So journals often leave the door open to authors to resubmit a revision. So here are some wording types that you can see that will clearly tell you that your paper is not going to get accepted after it's being reviewed. So we cannot publish your manuscript. Your study does not contain novel results. We appreciate, but we will not further consider. We wish you luck in publishing your results elsewhere, but somebody wants to unmute and say something. Okay. So here are some wordings that you would potentially get as an author that would invite a resubmission. The reviewer comments are not entirely negative. It's not possible to consider your manuscript in its current form. I hope the information provided will be useful. I regret that the outcome has not been favorable at this time. So an actual email from an editor, from an author that I've shared with you before. Thank you so much for considering my manuscript, and thank you for the reviewers for their valuable and constructive comments and suggestions. If you give me the chance to make my revisions, I will consider them. This is a good email from an author. I give up. The referees can calm down. I get the impression that they will just come up with another whinge, delay, or frustration. This is a bad email from an author. So remember, editors are just clicking buttons in automating systems. So don't take their comments personally. Should you take their advice and revise your paper, even if you've received a rejection, it's always worth considering. Don't miss out on chances to get your work into those target journals. It's difficult for us as editors to keep everybody happy. And you can see here, dear Dr. Blank, please can we follow up and ask about your review of blank? We appreciate your time, but your review is now 6 weeks overdue and our authors are waiting. So there are things that we try to do as editors. There are things that we try to do as reviewers to speed up the process. And there, of course, there are many examples of peer reviewer bias in the system. And I give you one here. This is one of my own papers that was rejected 3 times until it was accepted after the University of Manchester was added on the author list. So there are a number of examples of bias, byline bias, institutional bias, geographical bias, language bias, research ethics bias, and methodological bias. That's of course part of the scientific process. Is it fair? Of course not. But how we deal with this as authors, as people engaging with the peer review process is very important. You can select journals that use double-blind review. Reviewers and authors are unaware of identities, name, and institution are blinded. Make sure to review to remove all author identifying marks on your documents. Use double-masked, double-blinded peer review. Limit your grant application to 2 pages. Focus on content rather than mechanics. Suggest to employ a diverse review panel to discover, deliver unconscious bias training to reviewers. And we can develop tech tools like AI. I have 7 dwarfs, people who we often engage with as editors during the peer review process. So when papers go out for peer review, the kinds of people that we get, the kind of people that we get engaged with articles as reviewers. Cursory. No use at all to an editor because of their very short cursory comments such as this paper is great or please publish as is. Secondly, aggressive peer reviewers. People who say this paper, hate the paper in question and try to bury. They hate the paper in question or they try to bury the study. Thoughtful reviewers. Comments are thoughtful, in-depth, and they provide constructive remarks that enable the author to improve their work. Jealous reviewers. Jealous reviewers tend to want to feel that they've made a contribution with their comments. Their name should be added to the study before publication. 5, late reviewers. People who are friendly and quick to email. I'm doing the review right now. Get this back to you. It's all talk. Reviewers who've been asked to look at papers and then passed over in the journal process, take too long, or because others return comments more promptly, or invisible peer reviewers. These are always 1 or 2 cases per month, the papers for which we simply cannot find anyone to. These are my 7 dwarfs of peer review. Thank you so much for listening. It's been amazing to see everybody this evening at this event at Research Squared Company. We provide access to the latest research and comment on emerging science. Oh, I've lost my screen.